3D printing sucks when you have the wrong equipment. Today we're going to look at how choosing the right machine can help you rethink the way you look at 3D printing. Today we're diving into a subject that's actually changed the way that I work, 3D printing. If you're into fabrication, automotive performance parts, or you just like making things yourself, having the right tools is essential to success. And just like having the right tool, choosing the right machine can save you time, money, and frustration. So stick around and I'll show you how my choice of the Bambu Lab A1 has completely brought my work to the next level. "3D printing has come a long way in a short period of time. It's also shaken up the manufacturing industry, even on a small scale. Things like automotive wheel hubs, suspension components, I'm sure you've all seen the videos. They are experimenting with 3D printing for every aspect in life. Heck, toys are being printed every day. One of the great things about 3D printing is it brings your ideas to life in hours as opposed to waiting weeks or months. I started my 3D printing journey about 6 years ago, and being a budget-conscious person, I decided to dip my toes into it before I spent my hard-earned modification money on a 3D printer. So about 6 years ago, I decided to do what everyone else does. I went on Amazon and I started price comparison shopping. Noticed that there were low-range, mid-range, and high-range printers. I had a budget in mind when I went into this, and I found a printer that had the features that I was looking for and was in what I considered my mid-range budget. It was a Labist X1. The reason I chose this printer is after watching videos and looking at how other people had their system set up, it featured auto bed leveling, which to me, that seemed to be one of the factors that prevented a lot of good printers from being great printers. You know, I really enjoyed learning on that printer. Some of the features like the auto bed leveling worked really well when I first got it. I started building parts, developed some components for the Dodge Challengers, and put them up for sale, and what do you know, it was a hit. So I decided to go ahead and buy another printer. I knew what I had, figured I'd just get another one. Now we've got a little print farm going. Well, that's kind of where the honeymoon ended. What I didn't realize is I was about to learn a valuable lesson. You see, just like in the automotive world, you're either going to pay now or pay later. And what I mean by that is, when you're looking at a performance part, you're looking at your budget, your price point, but also what you're trying to achieve with that part. Take, for example, a turbocharger. We all know that we can go on wish.com or Temu or any of those assorted sites and buy a turbocharger that's off-brand, and it's going to work. How long it's going to work is the question. And that's really how 3D printing works as far as the machines go. There are entry-level machines like the Labist. There are lower price points. This one to my left is actually a Mega Zero by Anycubic. Anycubic is one of those companies that went from a very small company to pretty big over the last few years. Their printers have evolved over leaps and bounds. However, when this machine was released, it was $149 on the first 1,000 units sold. So I jumped on it. This was going to be my little printer to use at home. Well, here's a perfect example of my frustration. I was trying to do a demo for you guys on this printer, and instead of being able to print with it, all it's doing is scraping the nozzle against the bed surface. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to show you guys the speed differences between these two printers. But here's the limitations with a $150 3D printer. It does not feature auto bed leveling. And one of the features this one came with, you'll notice right now that I have a textured plate on here, but it looks like there's a very thick plate because this printer, when it came out, had a textured PEI build plate that was supposed to be the greatest thing ever. If I peeled off the magnet that's underneath this PEI plate, you'd see the craters of the moon. That's how well everything stuck to this bed. And that's not good. That can be a problem. If you look at the surface of this plate, you can see impressions of those old parts that I made way back when. That is not a good thing because that gets left in every surface that you print on after that. Take, for example, this. You want a nice smooth surface on one part of your model. On a textured PEI plate, it's going to look pretty good. It's not going to be completely flat, but you can get a flat build plate for the Bambu Lab printer. So you can have a completely flat surface, which looks like it was poured instead of printed out in lines. And that's kind of the aesthetics that people look for, and they notice the quality in the product at that point. So, onto the Mega Zero again. The build plate would never give you a smooth surface, and it wasn't removable because it had manual bed leveling. You had to turn these screws up and down, and it moves the entire plate. You use a piece of paper tucked in between the nozzle, and it takes forever. Other downsides of the lower priced machines, there's no real network connectivity. You're using a flash drive or an SD card to transfer from your PC to your printer, which that's not a bad thing, but again, it's time. If you're not home and you want to print something new, you have to have somebody there to go and take the card out, put it in your laptop, transfer the files over, and then put it back in the printer and start the print. That's time not everybody has. Now let's talk about the software and hardware that drives these machines. Most of them are built off of open source. Marlin firmware, you can use Orca Slicer, Cura, Anycubic has their own slicer, Bambu Labs have their own slicer. The slicer that's used in Anycubic is pretty good. I've made some pretty decent models on this machine. Unfortunately, over time, the quality has gone down, but the slicer has never been a problem unless I wasn't giving it the right instructions. Now let's talk print accuracy. Details are important. Getting into smaller models like miniatures and, toy cars, toy engines, things that need lots of detail, comic book busts like Deadpool. There's all kinds of little intricacies in the surface of your model that your printer has to interpret. And on these older machines, everything's belt driven and they're on rails with wheels. And over time, those wheels will loosen up, the bearings will wear, and you end up getting waves and deformations in your prints. Now, obviously, there's upgrades to correct those kind of things. They sell linear rail kits, they sell super high precision roller bearings, things like that to prevent the wobble and shake that these older machines will produce. Now, a lot of the lower dollar machines, the sub $300 machines, feature very hard plastic almost wheels. It is a Delrin. Delrin wears over time and it really doesn't like lubricants. So you either have to change them regularly or you have to make sure that they're not over tightened. And again, now you're sacrificing a little bit of your quality.
Wow.
And then we have the last topic I want to cover on the budget machines, the sub $300 machines, which that price point has changed up a little bit. And this machine is one of the reasons why. And we'll talk about that once I go over the features on this machine. But print speed on these old machines was horrible. You're looking at anywhere from 40 to maybe 100 millimeters a second for print speed. Example of that is I printed, like I said, those Dodge Challenger parts. It was a part about this big and about this round, and it took for 2 to print on this bed, and I had to do them at 2 at a time, and I'll explain that right before we get to this. But it would take anywhere from 8 to 12 hours, depending on if I had any color changes. I used to lay LEDs in some of them, so I would have to stop it, lay the LEDs, restart the print, and that added time to the print. So again, 40 to 100 millimeters a second, and you're looking 6 to 12 hours to make basically a cupcake. And see, this is where my relationship with 3D printing started to sour. See, my product actually did well and was starting to sell. I was moving units almost faster than I could pack them. But I started to notice something. The reason I wasn't able to pack units as fast as I was getting my orders is because I was spending more time printing and then cleaning up failed prints and, reloading machines, waiting for the printer to finish to make another order. It was getting very frustrating. And even though I had 2 machines and this one, running all 3 of them all day long, almost every day of the week, I got overwhelmed. So there's that lesson that we were talking about again. You pay now or you pay later. And I'm going to relate it like this. I like superchargers. That's my thing. I bought a Hellcat supercharger. I made an adapter kit. And I used my knowledge to get that to work together on a car that it shouldn't have been on. So what I didn't pay in money for the supercharger, I paid in knowledge and experience to get it to work together. Now, could I have just spent $12,000 and bought a Whipple kit? Sure, I could have, but I didn't have $12,000. I had a budget and I had knowledge. And these machines, well, unfortunately, I had to raise my budget. So I had all but written off 3D printing at this point for my business. I figured what was best to do at that point in time was to discontinue the product line, find another form of manufacturing for it, and re-release it when I felt more confident in my product and my ability to deliver. So I threw a towel over these old printers and I walked away from 3D printing. That's when this came into my life. You see, my daughter's friends are really into cosplay, and they had a convention that they were going to. So my daughter mentioned to them that I used to 3D print and I might actually be able to make those items. They already had the STL files, so for me it was just plugging them into the machine, push and play and going. And they weren't worried about time. They had months before this convention started, so I had all the time in the world to sit down and play with the settings on those older machines to get decent prints out. It didn't work so well. I had to struggle really bad because it had been so long since the machines had been used, they practically needed to be rebuilt. So like any man, I had to look at my wife and let her know, hey, there's a potential for X amount of dollars coming in the door. And in order to do that, I need to invest those dollars into a new printer so that I can make that happen. We agreed, and I started doing some research. Now, I went into my research this time with a lot more knowledge and experience. So I immediately went to the big dogs, looking at Creality, looking at Forge Maker and Prusa, and all of a sudden this new brand popped up that I had never seen, and the machine looked nothing like what I had ever seen for a small home tabletop bed slinger. This thing looked like a hot rod compared to this. I mean, just look at it. It's beautiful. They've got all the contours, and somebody really sat there and designed this and looked at it almost like an engineer looks at a car. They wanted every feature to be perfect. They wanted it to be visually appealing. They wanted it to be an iPhone. You know, simple. Turn it on, make a phone call, edit videos, and just at a push of a button. Know what everybody's saying? He's just another Bambu Labs fanboy posting about it so that, you know, he can show everybody he's got the Bambu Labs printer. No, screw that stuff. I looked at Prusa. Prusa makes the mark standard for a home 3D printer and entry-level industrial print farms. There's no doubt about it. However, I'm not spending $3,500 on a printer. There's just no way. Does the cost justify what it can do? No, it really can't. The only thing that justifies the cost of a printer like that is your customer support. And Prusa is amazing with customer support. Most of their parts for their printers are actually included with the printer as print files. So if something breaks, you can replace it right then and there. It's an awesome system. And that's kind of where we're going with 3D printing now. These companies are building an ecosystem around their machines. And those ecosystems is actually what's changed the way I look at 3D printing. And hopefully it's going to change the way you look at 3D printing after this video. When I say ecosystem, see, with the newer printers, everything's Wi-Fi. You're connected to your home network. So I could be at work, working on my work computer, designing a product, and if my printer bed is free, I can send it and print it while I'm at work. That's something that was impossible to do with these older machines unless you did all kinds of, add-ons. Things like Octoprint, and there were Raspberry Pi units that you could use to connect to Wi-Fi. And that was great for somebody who had the time, patience, knowledge, and experience to do those things. But I'm a car guy. I know how to build cars. I'm not really savvy on technology all that much. And I know what you're saying, but John, you're the mad scientist. How are you not tech savvy? You're on a YouTube channel. Come on. Well, what I mean by I'm not tech savvy is it's more a way that my brain works. I have ADHD and I think I may be on the spectrum a little bit. There are certain subjects I can lock into and I can just put myself in this zone. Engines are a perfect example of that. When I'm building an engine, I can just lock in and concentrate. However, when I'm sitting there editing the thumbnails for these videos, my brain is wandering around on what to do next. And oh, hey, people are gonna like this. So simplifying the ecosystem and how the printer worked and my ability to use it in places that I wasn't able to use it before really opened up a new world for me. And no, I'm not just being some Bambu Labs fanboy, but Bambu Labs has figured out their ecosystem. Their printers work really well, and even with incremental updates, they keep getting better. The print speed is unreal on these machines. What used to take this machine 6 to 12 hours can be done on this machine in 2 to 3. They're massive improvements in the user interface. The way that this thing detects the first layer, it uses a LiDAR sensor to see how thick the layer line is to make sure that it's compensating properly for temperature fluctuations in filament. That's unreal, and that's something I'd never be able to program. But I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. They obviously know what they're good at. And I've heard, people say that Bambu Labs is scanning all your files and pumping them out. You know what? Honestly speaking, in most situations, what more people are printing on these machines is little fidget spinners, flexi dragons, things of that nature. Because this printer has made it easy for anybody to go to a computer store, pick one up, or go to their website and buy one. And with the AMS unit, which is their multicolor system, you don't even have to do anything outside of going on Maker World, which is their website, and it has all of their models, pick something and print it. But like any great printer, you're not limited to just the files you can find on Maker World. I can go ahead and use FreeCAD, design a part, put it in the slicer, slice it, check it for any flaws, print it just like I did back with these printers. Now, some of the awesome features of the A1 is one of the best auto bed leveling systems I've ever seen. As I've already stated, it's got LiDAR sensors within it. It's got force sensors, shock sensors, and its print speed can exceed 200 millimeters a second. Travel speeds are lightning fast on this machine, and I don't see any effect in quality unless it's a highly detailed model. Highly detailed models, you're still going to want to run slower because it affects the surface of the model. All right, so you remember the wheels we were talking about on these print heads and how it would wobble the print after they'd wear? That problem's been eliminated on most of the newer printers. A lot of manufacturers are now using linear rails with high precision bearings to keep that print head from moving back and forth. Now your side to side is still controlled by a belt. Belts are very good as long as they're tensioned properly to keep things in check. You will notice over time though, on any printer, that as that belt stretches, you may see some variations in your prints. However, they've made it very easy to adjust the belts on this machine. There is a special screwdriver that you need, but that can be picked up at any hardware store. Bambu Studio feels a lot like Orca Slicer. So having that as part of their ecosystem brought a familiarity to a lot of people that 3D print. It's very intuitive, it's really easy to use, you can set up multi-materials, and it's not locked down completely. It's not open source, so you can't make certain changes to the machine itself, but you can modify your print settings to your desired settings based on your filament, what you're trying to print, and things of that nature. Bambu's also included an intuitive touchscreen. It's got all the controls you would normally expect on a printer. It's really nice looking, it's full color. It shows you a preview of your model and the steps that it's taking. It doesn't go into some of the details like some of the older printers I had actually said what layer they were on, what their print speed was at that point in time, but you don't really need to know that stuff. It's just kind of cool to look at it every once in a while. The people at Bambu Labs actually even included a bunch of things that a lot of manufacturers haven't included before. Toolkits, grease, a swatch sample of all of their filaments that they offer as a brand, and a model kit that includes all the components to build something that the 3D print files are already available for, like a V-twin engine or a marble maze. There's a lot of cool stuff that's available on MakerWorld where you can just buy the hardware component kits and then print the model out, and you've got a cool little toy when it's all said and done. So thanks to the modernization of 3D printing, it reinstilled my confidence that I can now safely produce components again and not have to worry that my machines are going to bog down or I'm going to not be able to meet my orders because I'm spending more time sweeping the floor around the machine and getting failed prints off of print beds than actually making product. I can now do in a day what I used to take 2 or 3 days to do. All right, so Mad Scientist, how much do these things cost? All right, these machines are available anywhere from $379 when they're on sale to up to $600 with an AMS unit. Now, the AMS is multicolor. If you're not printing in multicolor, which I usually don't do, you don't need an AMS system. So the $379 investment, yes, it was more than double what I originally paid for this machine. It was well worth it in the long run because my first 2 items that I printed paid for the printer. You know, and another thing that helped rejuvenate my joy of 3D printing is I also purchased a resin printer. And part of the sword that you just saw, those components were printed in clear resin through a resin printer and then grafted onto the item with glue. It gave it a really cool effect and it makes everything look completely tied in. So, having the right machine, spending the money can give you something that will produce the quality that you want and the confidence to let people purchase that from you and not worry down the road that it's going to fall apart. So it kind of all boils down to this, folks. 3D printing isn't for everyone. However, this 3D printer is. If you're curious and you're looking at getting into 3D printing, look into the Bambu Labs A1. It's an incredible machine. I'm not paid by Bambu Labs. This isn't sponsored. I paid for this out of my own pocket. So to kind of wrap things up, what helped me with 3D printing again and bringing back my joy and why I no longer think it sucks is having a printer that just works. And it works almost right out of the box. Yeah, there's some assembly that needs to be done, but this machine, when it came, It was in a box that was about this tall and about this wide. And I had to put the whole thing together. Every screw, nut, and bolt was labeled in bags and everything. And I love doing that. That's great for a guy like me. But I don't always have time for it. And I'd rather just pick up something that's going to work. So thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you on the next one.